I appreciate you being here early. This is something that I wanted to start doing early in the morning. This is day one of me sharing keys that I've been studying. I had a dream, and in one of my dreams, a messenger came to me and it said, "Give him those keys." And I had asked myself, like, what the hell does that mean? I thought I was giving them the keys. I thought I was teaching. I literally just traveled around the world. And what I realized, there's a lot of things that I study that I know that I use to improve that I don't always share. And so I believe that that's what it meant by give them those keys. When I first started this journey as 19 keys, it was all about enlightening the mind, and it always has been. But I fear that I have not been sharing all the keys that I know. Um, and I believe that if I don't share those things, right, then I'll be doing an injustice to my audience. I'll be doing an injustice to the world. And today I want to share a concept that I think will change your life. And it will change the way you see yourself, the same way you see the world, right? And it's called time blindness, or as scientists call it, temporal blindness, right? So we're gonna get into this a little bit. And as we're going through this, I would love to hear from you all because I know that you're going to be able to understand some things about yourself that you probably wish somebody would have told you a long time ago, right? So here's what we're gonna start off with. Shout out to the chat and everybody that gets up early for these. I'm gonna be doing this until I get 1 million followers. So y'all gonna be getting a whole lot of great breakdowns from me. But first of all, I believe that time blindness is the real wealth gap. It's the reason why a lot of people are poor. So, what is temporal blindness? Temporal blindness is literally an inability to feel the future, right? When you have a poverty based mindset, you're in stress, you're in anxiety, right? Or you have an ADHD brain, right? You have an inability to feel the future, to feel that the future is imminent. And the way it works is that if I ask you about next week, right? And you can place yourself physically there next week or mentally there next week. You can feel it. You can start making plans towards next week. We have an executive function in our brain, and this allows us to make decisions to where we can organize ourselves over time. Now, this is very important to what's necessary for human beings. But the way that you get robbed of this is that instead of that particular part of your brain being active, right, the executive function of your brain, the ability to organize itself over time, what end up happening is that that part of your brain is not being activated. So when you set a goal and you have an idea of something that you want to do, you end up waiting until the future feels close, until it feels so close that it's like to smack you in your face. Then all of a sudden you want to start taking action. Now, this is a very bad and very terrible thing to do, right? Of course, we all know this because people have been to school before. You had homework that you had to do, and you would do it the last minute because the future felt imminent. This is why, as a Black community, we typically don't act on things until they feel urgent because most Black people have a temporal blindness. Now, this origins goes deep. Indigenous, original people, Africans all have a lot of this same temporal blindness as well. In fact, if we're looking at the philosophy of African time and the psychology of how Africans view time, right, it's more so around events, right? It's about relationships and identity, right? And this network that you have. But more specifically, they view time as polychronism, right? And so there's the past and then there's the present, but there's not specifically the future. And there's every action that you take that then gets inserted into the past. But if you look at and you study the African language, there's not too many words for near future or many words for maintenance because if something is working now, then it's working, period. Right? Now, this can be a very dangerous thing. Why? Because this allows you to be conquered by other people who see time as a territory, who see time as something to be conquered, right? Now, for these particular short philosophy bites, I don't have a whole hour, so I'm trying to cram this concept into something short, like 19 minutes for you all. And I want you all to share this, and I know you're going to have more questions, and I will be going over this more. But let me give you the definition of Afropolychronism. It is a time system in which the past remain alive in the present, and the future only becomes real when attached to concrete events, right? You do not move away from the past, you carry it. You do not carry race into the future. You do not race into the future, you wait for it to approach, right? This produces a very strong memory, strong ancestral awareness, strong cultural continuity, right? And very strong group identity. But what it does not do, right, is it doesn't make you a strong abstract future planner. So you have weak, long distance sequencing towards time, right? Heavily dependent on events rather than schedules. And then you have a difficulty with structured time. So for me, I'm a non-linear thinker, right? I think in cycles, I think in loops, I think in chunks, right? But colonial time is thinking in linear time, right? That the future is this linear path, it's this arrow of time that's kind of pointed forward, right? Now, this would not be a problem if we lived on the planet Earth and we were separate. But think of it like this. When the European came over to Africa and you had these Africans living in their African time system, right? When an event happened, time was activated. The future became real, right? They were waiting for things to come because it's like waiting for the sun to rise, right? That represents the future. You're now in a new cycle. You're in this consistent loop. Now, if you're somebody that is living in a land of abundance, like I just left Uganda, it's a land of abundance where I talked to the president and he said something that resonates. He said that even a fool can survive here, right? And what that means is that, thank you, Get Your High Works 8284, appreciate you. What that means is that they have so much abundance, right? They have so many natural resources. They have so much food or fruit everywhere that even if you don't have money, you can still survive. Why? Because you can never starve. Everything is in abundance. There's more than they actually need out there because the land is so fertile, right? It's so fruitful. It's a land of abundance. Now, this is a very interesting thing. So, in that case, they're not really overly ambitious and overly aspirational about things because they don't need to be. Now, let me give you a juxtaposition towards that. There's a book called The Ice Age Inheritance, and this Ice Age Inheritance speaks on the fact that growing up in like cold climates, right, caveman type climates, right, you're always in survival mode. You're never having enough, right? So you're not saying that I'm happy with what I have. You're always thinking towards the future, saying that there's going to be a point in time where I do not have enough. So therefore, I should think towards that time. And then that time starts to feel real now. So you're making an action as if the future is already happening. So therefore, if your neighbor has half and you have half, you want their half, and you're never comfortable with what you have. So you become dominant. You become a conqueror. You're always looking at things to seize because you're not living like ancient indigenous people who are living within a rhythm of time. What I mean by that is let's look at ancient Kemet, right? Ancient Kemet meaning the land of black. This black land, very strong, fertile soil, right? By learning this soil, learning agriculture, learning the rhythm of the universe, learning when the tides come in with the moon, right? Learning the cycles of the seasons, they was able to understand harvesting, able to understand crops, right? To where they knew how to grow food in rotation. They weren't starving for anything because they had an understanding. They started to understand the science of the earth. This science allowed them to start building. There's nothing more consistent than God. There's nothing more consistent than the universe. The universe will provide. The seasons will always be the seasons. The land will always be the land. This allowed them to start serving multitudes of people and start producing markets for food. So therefore, they're not really tripping off anything because they can live in harmony because they know that what they need will be provided. They have a beautiful, warm climate, right? They have abundance of food. They have the knowledge to know how to grow, and they're living in cycled time. They're living in the rhythm of nature. Now, if you didn't know, the clock wasn't made to around the 1500s. right? First, of course, you had sundials, which was depending on the sun, right? The sun shadow going around and tells you what time it was. But when you're talking about actual clocks, this is a European invention. We weren't worrying about clocks. Why? We're not running out of time no time soon. What do you got to be? We on Earth. We're melanated beings living in harmony with the land, right? And we have abundance and plentiful. So it's different when you're living in a cold territory and you're always in the mindset of survival. And so there's two different mindsets that go into it, right? The African time, therefore, is not a failure of discipline, especially when they're thinking about time, right? But their philosophy of time is where the present is full and the future is conditional, that the future may or may not happen. It depends. Where if you grow up in America, right, we can hold two time systems. The African time, which is why we got CP time. We call it colored people time. Y'all know we don't like being on time for nothing because we feel like, it doesn't start, time don't start till we arrive. It's a psychological thing. Now, if you planning something, right, and or if you have a person that comes into your tribe, right, and they have a different psychology of time. They have a different way of mastering you. They're not mastering you through conquering of the land. They're going to master you through conquering of your time because they're playing chess with time. That I can make this one move and then it will ripple in the next 50 years. So this is why even indigenous people can sell land because they didn't understand concepts, right, of land ownership. But more specifically, they didn't understand how somebody can own something for 100 years, 200 years, 500 years in perpetuity. These concepts had not yet been introduced to them, right, because it did not live within a psychology, because they lived in harmony with the land, in harmony with nature. So for me, I was studying this because I remember I was in when I was in Uganda. Um, I noticed, and you notice everywhere you go when you start to understand the psychology, right? And I want you all to relate this to yourself in just a second and how this goes towards your wealth. But we were setting up on the top of this hill for this high level conversation. And we were standing up because there were no chairs there. So we just waiting and we waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I was wondering, like, why don't they just bring the chairs first so that we can sit down, right? Then they bring the tables, then they bring the cameras, then they bring the lights, microphones, the whole setup. But for them, right, they weren't thinking in time in linear steps. I'm going to do this, then do this is going to follow, then this is going to follow, then this is going to follow. For them, it was like, no, this is all one event, right? The only thing that is going to take place is that we're going to load up everything all at once. And then there's the event in which we unload everything. They wasn't thinking in linear sequence of steps, right? So therefore, my chairs never arrived separately. Everything arrived all at once because they was looking at it as an event, right? Now, this may be a simple thing, but when you're observing something like this, you're noticing why people do things, right? And you're noticing how the African sees time. I'll give you another example. When you do business out there, instead of putting money in escrow, which is like a middleman account where the money is being held by neither you or the other party, right? It's safely held there in the condition that the terms are satisfied between you and the other party, then the money is released. So let's say we get a contract to build a building, right? And they say, okay, look, we want you to build this building. How much does it cost? And I'll say 100 million. They're not going to say, okay, well, I'm going to give it to you in increments. I'll give you 20% now, another 20%, another 20%, 20. No, they're going to say, okay, I'll give you the whole 100 million now. It's not broken down in linear steps. It's all at once. It's one event, it's one negotiation. And this actually allows a lot of corruption to happen. And this allows them to be taken advantage of a lot by a lot of people who've come there. And this is where I see that there is a trait of psychology that needs to be understood, especially as you're dealing with people who see time as a territory to conquer. If you study something called the Papal Bulls were the papers that the Pope had instituted that said that they ruled the world, right? And then, of course, it was them taking us off the Julius Caesar calendar because he wanted to control time. Julius Caesar wanted to control the world. Then we got on the Gregorian calendar, which is instituted by the Pope. That was instituted by the Pope by the decree of the Papal Bull, right? Which then put everybody on one time system. So it went against the Ethiopian 13 moon systems, which is going into the cyclical cycle of the 13 moons that happen within a 360 plus day period, right? Which probably leaves about additional 5 days if we're talking about a full elliptical, right? That is taking into account the sun, but it also takes into account what? The woman in her period and her cycles. So Ethiopia, I think, is somewhere in the year 2014 because they're on a different time system, right? Where the European put everybody on Gregorian calendar. He put everybody on his time, right? So even as we talk about we're in the year 2025, by whose standards measurements, if the earth been here for millions, billions, and we can't even account really how much time the earth has been here. You have to think about even the way we're living in the construct of time, right? And why is it resetting and why are we in the year 2025? This really doesn't make sense. Psychologically as well, but philosophically it does if you want to have rulership. You control the way people think about time. Now, how does this affect you in your daily life? Well, temporal blindness happens a lot with people who have ADHD brains, right? It's not that you have a lack of discipline. It's not that you have a lack of willpower, right? You have a temporal blindness. And this temporal blindness makes it damn near impossible for you to see the future, right? And so therefore you wait for things to be urgent before you start to take action because the executive function of your brain that manages decisions have been shrunk, right? And so this part of the brain really should be producing serotonin, right? Delayed gratification that makes you feel calm as you're executing. But instead, we're searching for dopamine. We're in hyper dopamine loops, constantly searching for novelty, something that makes us feel good, right? And this is the reason we can be on our phone focused, but we can't focus in life because instead of us producing the serotonin that calms us so we can execute and manage ourselves over time to get things done that are long-term goals that may not give us a reward into the future, right? A month from now, 2 months from now, a year from now, the future doesn't feel real. So you only act within your time window in which the future feels. So you can feel the next day because there's an imminent threat. You have to pay a bill. You owe somebody. You feel it because there's an event you have to go to. So therefore, your brain can now organize itself to start taking action. But what happens is there's a part of the brain that has knowledge. So no matter how much you learn, it's not a problem of knowledge. It's a performance issue because the part of the brain that knows and the part of the brain that does, the part of the brain that organizes, these become disconnected. So now these parts of the brain are not connecting with each other. So now you cannot do what you know. You cannot get yourself to do what you know. So therefore, we have a generation of unlimited information, but limited execution. And this affects poor people even more. This affects people who are in stress even more. And specifically, it affects African indigenous people even more as well, because we already have a psychology of time that is different. And so we have to force ourselves to be in a linear time schedule, which is why one of the hardest things for people is managing time. And so when you have a job, you think you're good at that. But then when you're working for yourself as a creator, right, managing time becomes the hardest thing because you have to force yourself to be put into these increments of time. Increments of time was really created by the Greeks when you start talking about chronon. Chronon is known as, or Father Time, right, is known as the one who holds the sickle. He is always in chaos with the younger generation and older generation to the point where there's a picture of him depicted eating his own children, right? Now, once you get off of rhythm with time, right, like right now, it's early in the morning and my body don't know what time it is. I have to go stare at the sun in a second, right, when we're in low radiation periods. And what that does is the light is signals through my brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is your timekeeper in the brain that regulates temperature, that regulates the body. It lets my body know what time it is, right? What to perform, what actions, when to wake up, when to produce melatonin that helps me fall asleep, right? But when that part of my brain is not properly regulated, right? Because I've been traveling so much, my body don't know what time it is. So it might be waking me up at 3 in the morning. So what I would have to do is then reprogram my body so it knows. Take a cold shower early in the morning, take a warm shower at night, do certain exercises, sun gaze, things of that nature, so that my circadian rhythm, right, the rhythm that is in tune with the what times biologically my body should emit certain chemicals within, right, myself, so that I can be more focused, right, I can be calm, I can work out, etc. That part of the body is now being dysregulated, right? And this happens with a lot of people who are in anxiety, a lot of people who stressed out. The hormones are off, right? So therefore, your circadian rhythm is off. You're overstressing. You're producing chemicals at the wrong times. You have too much anxiety. Your sleep cycles become off. So therefore, your life becomes off. So instead of you having a body that is calm, that is producing serotonin, that can execute at a high level, right, to organize itself over time, you are in an environment that is low bandwidth and you have high level thoughts and you cannot perform. So therefore, it is a performance issue. It is not an intelligence issue. It is not a discipline issue. You need to create a system and you need to focus on environment that allows you to perform, but specifically you need to focus on externalization that allows you to be reminded of what to perform. So your brain is constantly being reminded so that you can constantly execute, so that the future starts to feel real the more you remind yourself about it. Now listen, I went over my 19 minutes. We end at 21 minutes, so I'm going to leave there. But this was day one, and I hope this has helped. I'm literally writing a book on this and a few other ones at the same time. I had to start printing out all of my notes for things. Tomorrow I'll be going over something else, but in our Patreon, we will be going over this in full detail, and it will be an entire lesson that you will understand. Once you get this, I promise you, your life changed. Once you really understand it, life started changing for me because I realized sometimes I can have temporal blindness, right? Inability to perform actions, even though I know exactly what to do, right? Then I had to start learning my cognitive type. Then I had to start learning how to program myself. And then you realize is that, wait a minute, the white man and European often wins because that part of their brain, that linear time system, they've mastered that. They can go to Africa, do one deal that colonizes the people for the next 100 years because the African might not have understood that. The black man signs a contract in the music industry, contract that robs him of his masters. He had temporal blindness. He was thinking about next week. He wasn't thinking about the next 20, 30, 40. Now we're 50 years into hip hop, right? And so your life has to be reset. You have to get back to a natural rhythm, but more specifically, you need to know how to control your environment. Your environment is very important. You need to decrease your distractibility. You need to have groups that can keep you accountable, right? And you need to learn the process of externalization. Stop internalizing things because that internal mechanism is not working. But when you externalize it and you can see things in front of you, like I have to put things in front of me so that my brain can start organizing and executing. Remember, it's not a discipline problem. It's a system problem. 19 Keys. I hope you enjoyed this. This has been the 19 Keys Show. Catch me in the rising, man. Y'all having Supermind coffee with keys. Maybe we call this coffee and keys. Yeah. Peace to the family, peace to the gods. Oh, and if you want to get my first book that slightly touched on this, right? Comment or go to my DM and comment the word bundle. It'll give you this plus some free ebooks that come along with it. Not the physical, but the digital. So you get access to it immediately.